Rock and roll. Olivia, welcome to Tough Talk.
I'm so happy
So,
to be here.
yeah, we're pumped. We're pumped. And Tough Talk is an interview series where we ask smart people tough questions about career growth, what it's like to be in a growth industry or growth role, what it's like to be at a fast growing company, and then some questions about personal growth. And I feel like you check the boxes for all those questions. So excited to dive in.
Yeah.
The first thing I want to talk about is so we've got an opportunity at Tough to work directly with you, but kind of observing your career and growth over the last couple of years, you seem to me like a master at cultivating a powerhouse team. Kind of like no matter what startup you're actively working at, you seem to bring in really smart people. And I'm curious, what do you like when you join a new startup or a new business and you immediately know you need to be supported by a kick-ass team? What do you look for in that team?
I think I really look for how people are living out the values that either I've come to realize over my career are really important, especially in like startups to have, which is being like super agile, open to feedback, and also just having like a really great, I won't say strong personality, but like having that personality where it's like they are able to make people feel really comfortable around them or are great at explaining things or are great at saying like, hey, I don't know. I think those are all good things. And those are like things that I embody. So I think those are also things that I look for in people as well. And as cliche as it is, I think I'm a big like go at your gut person. I think every person I've hired in the last year or so across different career or different companies, they've all not been perfect. And I'm a big proponent of like, not every person is going to be perfect, but there's just something about them that is like, they're really good at this. Like I hired a graphic designer who worked her way through college and worked like a full-time job as a graphic designer through college.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, she might have graduated 2 years ago, but she has 5 years of experience. Like not everyone's going to be perfect and not everyone's going to have like the perfect career path, but there's just something about them that in my gut is like, you can do great things. And I think
Mm-hmm.
knowing how to pick up on that is like a big thing, but also it's like those people are super special.
Hmm. I cannot relate more with the idea that nobody's perfect. I think at Tough, one of the things that we do before we post a job or think about hiring a new team member is we put together kind of like it's called an impact description, but essentially we break out like what that person needs to know, what that person needs to be able to teach, and what that person can learn. And I think that learn bucket is so important because it's so easy to be like, I need the perfect candidate who checks all of these boxes. You'll never find that. And
Right.
so being able to acknowledge that nobody's going to be perfect is, I think, so important.
Definitely. Yeah.
I'm curious, are you able like maybe it depends at the startup or the company that you're working at, but who are typically like your first three hires that you make when you join a team and why?
Yeah. I think there's always the ones that I want to have, and there's always the ones that I am told I need to have.
That's a
I
good distinction.
yeah, I because of where I'm sure we'll get into this later on, but because of where my philosophies of growth, especially for a company, especially one that's super new like Sesh, is I'm really big on like retention. People are like, what's happening post conversion? Like I can find a lot of people tough to help me with that pre-conversion work and the ads and all that great stuff. And maybe that's one of the first people I hire as well. That was obviously one of the first people I hired here at Sesh. But I'm really big on like what's happening post conversion. So like engagement, social media manager, retention manager,
Mhm.
and someone that I always have wanted to hire at different roles, but I never really had the opportunity until I was here at Sesh was a product marketer because it's like that perfect straddling position between product and marketing to really bring together like what we're communicating to other people. And it works so well with the other positions. And I finally was able to hire that person here.
Mhm.
Um, But yeah, I would say those are like my top three. It's usually, or maybe it's more like three and a half, is like acquisition, retention, and a product marketer. But I think I
Hmm.
can easily switch out one of those with a social media manager too, depending on what the company is and what they're doing.
Hmm. It feels gutsy, to have retention on your list, although it's like I think anybody in growth would argue, obviously if you have a leaky bucket, you're never going to be successful. And the more intimately you
Right.
can get to know your community, the more successful you're going to be. But it's also you can see a lot of founders, or at least that we've worked with at Tough, it's so acquisition focused. Like they definitely like track LTV and on like revenue from returning users. Um, and churn, obviously really important metrics if you're raising or growing a business, but there's this like more revenue, new users scale. And so I could see it being a gutsy or a call that maybe earlier on in your growth career would have been more difficult to like really be like, we've got to double down on retention when so much of the
Right.
conversation with growth is like acquisition, more traffic, more traffic.
Yeah, one of the things that I've done in my last couple of roles is when I started as typically the first marketing hire on a team is really look at like an NPS score and other engagement metrics. And I will
Mm-hmm.
do an NPS survey within the first couple of weeks of starting because I want to know what that baseline is for how
Mm-hmm.
people are, how satisfied people are. And I know if that NPS is low, we don't need acquisition. We need retention, and we need to be able to, like you said, what, the leaky bucket, like what do we need to fix internally? What do we need to fix with the people we already have versus going out and getting new ones,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just going to be an endless cycle of bad scores and unsatisfied people.
You touched on something that I think is really interesting. It's like you thrive being the first marketer at an organization, and that is tricky, and it's not for everybody. What do you think makes you suited, like whether it's your experience or like personality wise, to be the first marketer at a small, fast growing company?
Yeah, I think most of it's really been like happenstance, honestly. I think it's just like happened with the type of companies I've gone after, even with some of the larger companies I've worked for. It's just like, oh, you're the first one on the team. And I'm like, great. But I think personality wise, I tend to get like very in the weeds, which as I've become a people manager, I've been able to become really balanced. But like actually having that time as the first hire to kind of deep dive into things is something that I love doing, and just really kind of heads down, strategize and develop whatever our next steps are. So I think from a personality perspective, that's one thing that I love, because there's often like no rush to hire people. There's no rush to, there might be a rush to start a specific initiative around like acquisition or something like that. But most people I've worked for understand that there's a lot of groundwork and framework that needs to go into that before we start any of those. And I think from a personality perspective, that being like that that loner type, it works really great. But also from the career side, I just love getting in and doing that work and like really
Mm,
figuring out what we need to do. And I think especially within early stage startups, there's so much opportunity. I'm seeing that at Sesh right now. There's like so many things we can do, and it's like I have the capability and also just the time to like figure out what our next steps are. I mean, I've
mhm,
also hired and transitioned a couple people onto my team, but it's like they're all part of that. They're all part of that big working function of like, what do we do next?
mm, mhm, mhm. Which is like at a early stage startup, spending your time on the right things, is so important. And so it's like when you have 100 things, but you have resources for 10, you get really good at prioritizing what to work on.
Yeah, definitely.
You touched on this, but being in growth and marketing for the last 10 some years, what do you look for in the people that you're going to work for? Like what characteristics are really important out of like the founder or the boss that you're going to collaborate with so closely?
Yeah, I think it's similar to what I look for in employees, but it's like really something I really look for is that like that ability to understand the people who are working for you. Like you've hired them to do a specific role, and
Hmm.
for lack of better terms, they know what they're doing. So I really look for that like support and trust in a leader. But I also look for a leader who's like also not afraid to take feedback or like that managing up perspective. And it's obviously hard to find that when you're just interviewing, but it's also, I also like to look at the company as well. Like, why did they start their company? Why are they looking to grow the company and all these different things? And if there's like a lot of passion and belief behind that, versus I've interviewed with other companies where it's all about the TAM, like this is how much money we can make doing this project. I'm like, I'm not really interested in that. I know
Mm-hmm.
that I can make money, and in like a somewhat cocky way, I know I can help you make money, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't really care about making the money. I want to know why we're doing this. So I think
Mm-hmm.
the ability for someone to really explain that is helpful, and something that I saw in Tori here when I was in the process. Like we spent so much time talking about how big this could be, how big Sesh could be from like a help perspective versus a money perspective, where I was like, you know what, you already know this can make money. You don't have to tell me that this can make money. You're more concerned about how this can help people and how we get to that point of reaching so many people. And that was
Mm-hmm.
something that was really important to me. And again, similarly to when I'm finding people on my team, I think it's also knowing that they're okay with saying like, we didn't do the right thing here, or this isn't the right path, or even being okay with telling me that, instead of me having to like figure it out. It's like I'm very open to feedback. If you can tell me like, hey, this wasn't the right move, instead of just letting me figure it out, then I thrive in that type of environment.
Mm-hmm. I think, especially in like a remote setting, I think like coaching and feedback feels at least more important for me in my role today than I think it's ever been. And one thing Tufts doing is we've been partnering with Life Labs to do more kind of like manager training. And we had this full session on feedback skills, how to give feedback, how to receive feedback. And it was really, really eye-opening that at Tough, despite that being something that we really value, we hadn't necessarily like put tools and practices in place to create a culture where feedback is the norm. I'm curious, like, is there anything you intentionally do to encourage like an environment where feedback is the norm, or is it just felt like that's part of your personality, so it kind of starts to just slowly infest in the company?
Yeah, I think it being part of my personality is a big one, but I think I, especially being, I don't know, for some reason it seems easier being remote. I don't know if it's because over Slack, you're always like, oh, I wonder if that's okay. I wonder if that's okay. Like, because we're not
Mm,
face to face. So you're more likely to ask for feedback around something. But I think
mhm,
one here at Sesh, I think it's just generally like our culture to be very open with what we have to like. Whenever someone presents anything for the company, they're always like asking for questions, asking if they would
mm,
like something different, things like that. Like I think that's something that's kind of instilled here. But I
mhm,
think even with my um, direct reports that I have coming on, and just the one-on-ones that we've had, I think I've always tried to leave a section open, not necessarily at the end where people feel like they're on the spot for having to give
mm.
feedback, which I think is like one huge thing is like when you have to be put on the spot for feedback, you're probably not going to get feedback.
Yeah.
Um, but
Your mind goes
also,
blank.
yeah, you're like, what am I supposed to say right now? Or like, how should I phrase it? But also just like when we're discussing like projects, or like right now with the people who are coming on my team, they're transitioning from another team. So I'm like, these are the projects that I want you to own when you fully transition over. Like, do you have any feedback on this? Do you have any questions?
Mhm,
How is there anything you want me to make more clear for you, or anything like that? Like just cultivating that opportunity when things are presented versus putting someone on the spot,
mhm,
is something that's really important to me.
mhm, mhm. And you also kind of you touched on this earlier, but I feel like your experience growing startups inside like a big, maybe well-resourced company that's extremely established versus like a more scrappy startup situation. How do those compare?
Yeah, I think when you're at a startup, you have the opportunity to do so much, and you might be limited in resources, but you don't necessarily you're not necessarily limited with ideas or like ways to growth hack or traditionally hack or any of that. Like there's so many things where you can like figure out how to do it, and because of the environment that you're in, it's super easy to figure out how to do it. When
Mm-hmm.
you're in a larger company, like I previously was, it's great to have that like startup feel, but if you have an idea and you have to still run it up the chain through like
Right.
5 people, one, while I totally respect that process and I understand it, sometimes things are so in the moment that you can't wait weeks for something to get approval or
Right.
any of that. Like, I want
Mm-hmm.
to try this, I want to try and send this email right now to see if we can get people to jump into the app. Well, we have to
Mm-hmm.
have that approved. And I'm like, it's just an email. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
like the only
Right.
thing that can go wrong is people overflow our inboxes with replies because they didn't like it or whatever, and that's easily manageable.
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
I think that's been the big difference for me. It's like having that creative moment and like having these ideas or like strategizing with my team, like, hey, this would be so cool if we could do that. And being in a startup environment, it's like, okay, now we just have to figure out how we do it with like limited funds or limited resources versus in that larger company, it's like, oh, now we have to wait for approval and we might not get it and people might forget. And we spend more time badgering them to let us know if we can do it. And that's just not, that's not a positive environment for me. I think
Mm.
it's kind of like that continuous like hitting a brick wall. Like you're driving full speed and then it's like boom, you hit the wall. And I think
Mm-hmm.
there's ways to like work with it, but at the same time, you may not be advancing your work by having to continuously go through that.
Hmm. It also feels a little counterintuitive to growth at an early stage company because it's like so much of what you need to do is find a way to test something in a very like quick, lean way, and then if it
Right.
works, you double down on it. So if you have this very small like sending an email test you want to experiment with, and it takes 3.5 weeks, it's like you just totally killed the momentum around learning from this really small tactic and you turned it into this
Right.
like big thing that you don't even know if it's going to work or not, you know? So you really
Right.
kill all of your momentum.
Yeah, exactly. And I think once it gets to that point, everyone's expecting it to be like awesome and great. And I'm like, hey, it might not be. It might
Exactly. And
totally
there's all this
flop.
pressure. You know, like
Yeah.
nobody opens the email, you know?
Right. And
Oh.
it's like, well, we tried and we waited 3.5 weeks to do this and it flopped.
Oh, yeah, that would be my nightmare. I'm curious, so on a remote team at Tough, we've been talking a little bit more, I think, especially as we are inching closer and closer to the end of Q4 and holiday season and the hecticness of the year. Just a little bit more about burnout and kind of ways to help with this. And I'm curious for you or your team, what's like one thing you do during the week to help recharge and like get away from your screen?
Yeah, that's a good one. So something that I did personally that I will probably encourage my team to do is figure out my sleep chronotype, which was
Hmm.
something that was like mind blowing to me.
Tell me about
I
that. I
forget.
don't know anything about that.
So basically, it's like you have tendencies or habits that show how you should sleep, essentially. And there's like 4 different types, and there's like dolphin, bear, and there's like 2 other ones that I'm not remembering, lion and another one. Dolphin is
Hmm.
like the worst because it's like you're an insomniac and you don't get a lot of sleep, so you don't
Oh
feel
no.
really rested.
Hmm.
Bear is like the better one because it's like a normal sleep
Mm.
schedule, but it's like it's basically saying that all these things that you do tell you what how you should sleep, essentially. And like they've developed these schedules around them that's like this is when you should sleep, this is when you should drink coffee, this is when you should take a midday nap, and like all of these different things. So I'm a bear type, which tells me that I should sleep between like 11 p.m. and 7 a.m.
Hmm.
And then only drink coffee between like 10 and 11 or something like that. And then I should take a rest time from 2 p.m. to 2:50 or like 2 to 3 to essentially rest my eyes and then get back to work because of how I sleep. That's when I hit like the midday, like you're done burnout type thing. So I started doing that, and I've been doing it for the past, I would say 3 weeks. So we have one more week until it becomes a habit, I guess. And I've honestly have felt so much more productive doing that because it's like I take essentially like nearly an hour to just like not look at my computer. Might look at my phone, might listen to like 2 podcast episodes or whatever, but I'm intentionally not looking at my computer. And I think just that process of like giving my brain a break during the day, and I literally have it on my calendar so no one can look over it. Um, it just kind of it provides kind of like a reset for me. And I think one thing that I've experienced, especially with being like usually the single marketing person or marketing hire on the team, it's like I've been really quick to hit burnout because there's just been so much to do,
Right.
so much in a week, so much in a month that I'm just like, especially by the time the holidays come around, I was that person that took the week off between Christmas and New Year's. I was like, I can't do anything for those couple days that we're back. But I found that I have felt way less more burnt out at the end of the week by taking these like hour-long breaks during the day. And it's definitely something I would encourage other people to do, especially on my team, because I think being remote, it's become even easier to get burnt out. I think there's kind of like that balance of where you have time to do things at home, but you also have the ability and the opportunity to essentially work all day, which I'm guilty of that. Like I will close my computer at 10 p.m. And I've been working like all day, but I've done other things, but I've been working all day. So I think that's part of the big thing with remote work right now, but that's something that I've definitely noticed for myself and for my team. I'm a big and all the teams that I've had, I'm a big advocate for like taking time for yourself. Like, so if you don't feel like you're showing up your best self at this meeting, or if you don't want to run this meeting this week, or like whatever it might be, I'm a big like, hey, just speak up. We'll either move it, we'll do it next week, whatever it might be. Because it just hasn't been easy for everyone. And it's like, I know it's getting so old on like the pandemic talk and things like that, but it's like the past 2 years essentially have like not been that easy on anyone. And I think it's ridiculous to still see managers out there who are like, well, you are working from home, so you should be like pretty and it's like, no one's relaxed right now. Like if
The
I see
opposite.
that post, yeah, it's like it's the exact opposite. It's like if I see a post like that on LinkedIn one more time, I'm just gonna scream because it's like you don't have no idea what's going on in that person's home. It might not be relaxing at all.
Exactly.
So I'm a big encourager of that. And I even had a new hire ask me if they could like start on a Tuesday because the Monday is their birthday. And I'm like, yeah, like why would you want to start work on your birthday? Like you shouldn't have to ask for that. But yeah, I'm a big like take time off, take a Friday off. I also try and encourage people to not have like not every day be full stacked and kind of like spread out their meetings. I'm a big person for like, especially after a certain time on Friday, like not having any meetings and just having like time for yourself, because I think that's a good lead up to start recovering for the weekend, because that your recovery would technically start on Saturday and then you only have like Sunday and then you're preparing for Monday. So it's like take some time to like breathe before the weekend so you can have time and enjoy your weekend.
I cannot wait to share the sleep prototype with the tough team. I have a feeling based on your description, I'm also a bear. And I'm excited to share that because I do think, yeah, putting a little bit more discipline and schedule around kind of when you step away feels like a good way to make sure you get it in.
Yeah, definitely. It's been really impactful for me. And it's like, oh, I don't have to change my schedule, because so often you see like this is this top CEO's daily schedule. And I'm like, there is no way I'm waking up at 5 a.m. to do anything. But it's like I see this one and I'm like, oh, that's basically what I do now. So I just don't do this at this time. And oh, I get to take a nap too. That's great.
Yeah, somebody telling you you have to take a nap feels like my
Yeah,
ideal.
exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
I've only got two more questions for you. The next one is around, so you're the director of marketing at Sesh. Will you tell us about Sesh and then kind of like what you're focused on right now as a team?
Sure. So Sesh is a mental health app that focuses on connecting people to group sessions around a variety of topics, anywhere from anxiety to depression during a pandemic, or dealing with relationship trauma and things like that. All of our sessions are led by licensed therapists, licensed clinical social workers, all of those people that have a ton of experience with working in these very specific topics. And our intent is to help people connect with others through what they're seeking support for, in a very like not a hugely clinical setting to where they feel super comfortable with sharing. So many times I see a lot of other apps that are really focused on like the one-to-one type therapy, and it's like through text message or something like that. And we're really trying to show that that is a great option if it works for you, but what might not work for everyone, and really bring people together in that group setting, which is something that seems very essential in this world that we're in right now, where we've been isolated for a long time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm.
think a lot of our focuses right now, so we just obviously kicked off acquisition with you guys. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a big focus for us, but we're really looking to ramp up our user base, is a big one, and really just get the word out there about what we're doing. We have a big focus right now on establishing the foundations, which is like, what's our acquisition strategy? What is our retention strategy? All of those things, and working into a fluid plan. And then another big focus for us right now is also like B2B partnerships. We've been partnering with a lot of companies where we are actually becoming a benefit service for their team.
Mm,
And
that's
so
fun.
team member, yeah, and it's been great because people can just go in there and being a group setting, they might have a person that they work with at the same company. They might not know them. We give them alerts if that does happen. But we have seen that a lot of these B2B users have been very excited to be participating in group sessions, because they might have like a one-on-one or like a help hotline available through their company, but this is just feels a little bit more relaxed. So we've been
Mm-hmm.
really focused on like using our resources to find more of those corporate partners that want to provide this as a benefit to their team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know about that positioning. Feels so exciting to have kind of like direct to users, but as well as like tapping into these larger
Yeah,
communities.
yeah. It's been really interesting, because we've seen that these users on the B2B side, although they're coming in like any other user, they're also like the most vocal with feedback, which is also great. It's probably
Mm.
because a lot of them also come from tech companies, but
Mm-hmm.
they really just love the sessions. They love that they can kind of go to a multitude of sessions during the week. Our most popular one is our Monday mindfulness, and like our Sunday scaries one. But I think us having those type of sessions where people can just kind of drop in and have a moment is awesome, and we've seen great results so far.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, Olivia, I got one last question for you.
I'm ready.
Um, what's like, if have you ever thought about the road not taken? Like, if you weren't in growth, you weren't in marketing, like, what is like, if you were to do it all over again, what's like a career path you would take?
That's a really good question. I was a bit rebellious when I was in high school, because my parents gave me like two options. They were like, well, you can go to college or you can go in the military. Both of my parents are vets, and
Hmm.
those are my two choices. And I was very against going into the military at the time. He's like, if I have to deal with people that are like my parents all the time, forget it. And
Sounds
so,
like a teenager.
yeah, exactly. And so I went to college, and I think when I was in college, I was either going to go the route of working in marketing, which is something I always wanted to do, or I was going to work in very specific, but like communications within the government. So I think if I was looking back, I really, if I would have taken the road less traveled, it would probably have been the first thing, which is going into the military, which I just tried to stay away from. But I also married someone in the military, so I didn't do a great job of that. Or I would have gone into working in communications in the government, which is something that's like still lingers in the back of my mind, probably because I'm so close to the government now, and I see the
Mhm.
ridiculous communications that my husband gets sent, and I'm like, you guys could do this way better, the marketing person in me. But
It's
yeah,
hard to
I
turn
think
it
those
off.
would be like, yeah, yeah, trying to turn it off. But I think those are like my two, those would be my two things that I would do. But I can kind of see myself doing very similar things. Like they're all very similar. Like I would still, if I was in the military, like I would want to do like that communications route
Mhm.
as well. I think this is just something I've always wanted to do. I was a big Wheaties box kid growing up, and it's like I wanted to design Wheaties boxes, and I quickly discovered after years of art classes that I have zero artistic ability. So it's like, you know what? I'm just gonna market Wheaties. That was my next thing, and yeah, and just never gave up on that.
That's amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining. You're an absolute rock star. I know I
Thank
speak
you
on
for
behalf of
having
the
me.
whole Tough team. Love partnering with you. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Of course.